One cruel cut of a pair of silver scissors left Grace's hair scattered across the white marble floor. But that wasn't what terrified her. Hidden inside that braid was evidence that could bring down a conspiracy buried inside the Romano Empire. While the mafia boss's fiancée believed she had destroyed everything, Adrian Romano stepped into the silent ballroom, draped his coat over the curvy maid everyone had underestimated, and made one decision that changed the course of every life in the room. Before the night was over, loyalty would be tested, painful secrets would surface, and the woman everyone ignored would become the one person capable of saving an empire. Every fork stopped halfway to every mouth when Victoria Caldwell grabbed a fistful of Grace Miller's long braided hair. The grand ballroom of Romano Crown Hotel fell into a silence so complete that even the string quartet seemed to disappear. Crystal chandeliers scattered cold light across polished marble as Victoria smiled for the wealthy guests surrounding them. "You forgot your place," Victoria said, lifting a silver pair of ceremonial scissors. "Maybe this will help you remember." The blades closed. A thick braid slipped from Grace's shoulder and landed softly against the white marble floor. No scream came. No tears followed. Grace stared at the braid for one quiet heartbeat before bending down. She gathered the loose strands with careful hands, took the scissors from Victoria without resistance, and cut away the uneven pieces herself until her hair rested just below her chin. Then she raised her eyes. "You didn't humiliate me," she said evenly. "You just destroyed evidence." Victoria's confident smile vanished. "What are you talking about?" Before Grace could answer, the elevator doors opened across the ballroom. Adrian Romano stepped out, followed by black-suited security. His expression never changed, yet the room grew colder as his gaze moved from Grace's shortened hair to the scissors still hanging from Victoria's trembling fingers. Without saying a word, he removed his tailored black coat and gently placed it around Grace's shoulders. No one dared breathe. His voice was calm, but it echoed through the silent ballroom. "No one touches a member of my household and keeps my protection." Victoria blinked in disbelief. "Adrian, it was only—" He lifted one hand. "Lock every exit." Security moved instantly. "No guest leaves. Secure every camera, every hallway, every service room." Grace pulled his coat tighter around herself, saying nothing. Across the ballroom, Victoria suddenly looked less frightened by Adrian's order than by Grace's strange warning. If the evidence had truly been hidden inside that braid, what had she just destroyed? Or worse, what if she hadn't destroyed it at all? 3 weeks earlier, Grace Miller stepped off an aging city bus into a bitter Chicago snowstorm. The Romano estate rose beyond towering iron gates like a fortress carved from stone, its warm windows glowing against the frozen night. Carrying one worn suitcase, she paused only long enough to whisper, "Mom, I hope this is finally a new beginning." Inside, the house manager looked Grace up and down before sliding a uniform across the counter. "We need fast hands here," he said with a smirk. "Not excuses." Grace answered with a quiet smile and started working without another word. She scrubbed marble floors, polished antique furniture, and carried heavy baskets through endless hallways while younger employees laughed behind her back. By sunset, every assigned task was finished, along with several that belonged to someone else. Late that evening, a porcelain cup shattered inside the library. Mrs. Elena Romano collapsed beside the fireplace. Panic swept through the room. Someone screamed for security. Another employee froze with a phone in trembling hands. Grace knelt beside the elderly woman, checked her pulse, then noticed two nearly identical prescription bottles lying open on the carpet. "She took the wrong medication," Grace said calmly. "Call emergency services now." Before anyone moved, the mansion's front doors burst open. Adrian Romano entered with his security detail, snow still clinging to his dark coat. The moment he saw Grace touching his grandmother, he drew his pistol without hesitation. "Step away." Grace slowly raised one hand but refused to leave Elena's side. "If I move now," she said evenly, "she could stop breathing before the ambulance arrives." For one impossible second, neither of them blinked. Then Adrian lowered the barrel just enough to let her continue. Minutes later, the family physician rushed inside, examined Elena, and looked at Grace with astonishment. "You saved her life." Adrian's eyes never left Grace. Finally, he asked the question no one else ever had. "Who are you? Really?" Grace met Adrian's steady gaze without flinching. "Just someone who spent years taking care of her mother. You learn a lot when hospitals become your second home." The physician confirmed her explanation, adding that a few more minutes could have cost Elena her life. Adrian slowly holstered his pistol, but his expression revealed nothing. The next morning, Grace expected to be dismissed. Instead, she was reassigned to Mrs. Elena Romano's private wing. When the estate manager handed her an envelope filled with cash, Grace quietly returned it. "I was hired to work," she said, "not to sell my kindness." Word spread through the mansion before lunch. Some servants called her foolish. Others whispered that she was trying to impress the boss. Grace ignored every rumor. Each morning, she carefully logged Elena's medication, meals, and blood pressure inside a small notebook she kept in her apron pocket. Within days, she noticed something everyone else had missed. The older woman's hands trembled only after taking one specific evening pill, and her brief moments of confusion always came afterward. Grace said nothing until she was certain. Meanwhile, Adrian found himself watching from a distance. She never rushed to greet him. She never asked for favors. She simply did her work with quiet precision. Late one evening, he passed the servants' kitchen and saw Grace reading an outdated medical textbook after finishing her shift. She didn't notice him standing in the doorway. The following morning, the old book had been replaced with a brand new edition. No note. No signature. Grace smiled the moment she opened it. That afternoon, Adrian entered his office and stopped. A fresh cup of black coffee rested beside a handwritten note. "People who don't sleep make expensive mistakes." For the first time in years, the corner of his mouth almost formed a smile. Hours later, while organizing Elena's medication tray, Grace froze. One bottle carried a tiny shipping symbol she recognized immediately. She had seen that exact mark years ago, on relief supplies delivered to the charity warehouse where she once volunteered. Why would a private prescription carry the code of a sealed Romano freight route? Something inside the mansion was terribly wrong. Before Grace could investigate, Victoria Caldwell arrived beneath black umbrellas, stepping from a silver car in a cream coat. Servants carried in designer luggage. Within minutes, the estate felt colder. At dinner, Elena asked Grace to remain beside her. Adrian listened when Grace suggested delaying an evening pill until its dosage was confirmed. Victoria noticed both things. Next morning, Grace's break vanished. Heavy linen carts replaced her usual duties, and the house manager loudly questioned whether someone her size could manage the stairs. Grace finished every task and helped a kitchen maid after the manager grabbed her wrist for dropping a tray. That evening, Victoria summoned Grace. "Serve dinner here," she ordered, though Grace's shift had ended. "The evening staff can assist you, ma'am," Victoria looked up slowly. Do you understand who I am? Yes, and I understand what my contract says. Adrian stopped outside the open door. Victoria smiled, expecting support. Instead, he watched Grace in silence. Later, near the dark conservatory, he found her returning Elena's notebook. Why aren't you afraid of losing this job? He asked. Snow pressed against the glass. Grace held his gaze. I spent years being afraid of losing everything. Then my mother died. The hospital took what little we had, and I lost it anyway. Adrian went still. For the first time, he told her about his younger sister, killed 10 years earlier by a bomb meant for his family. His voice remained controlled, but grief lived beneath every word. Neither noticed Victoria standing beyond the half-closed door. When Adrian said, "She was the last person I trusted completely," Victoria's expression hardened. Grace was no longer merely a maid. She was becoming dangerous. The next morning, she slipped one of Elena's strange pills into a tissue and took it to Dr. Hannah Brooks at the family's private clinic. Blue neon washed the hallway while nurses hurried behind glass doors. Hannah examined the tablet, then looked away too quickly. It's fine, she said. A harmless supplier change. Grace noticed the tremor in her fingers. Then why isn't the manufacturer listed? Hannah closed the case. You should let the doctors handle this. Grace left with more questions than answers. That night, while returning Elena's chart, she saw Gabriel Shaw step from the medical records room. Adrian's trusted attorney wore his usual calm expression, but a thick folder was hidden beneath his coat. Working late? Grace asked. Protecting this family never ends, he replied. His smile did not reach his eyes. Back in Elena's suite, Grace compared the shipping mark on the medicine bottle with an old photograph on her phone. Years earlier, while volunteering at a charity warehouse, she had seen the same symbol stamped on sealed relief crates moving through Chicago's freight yards. She carried the bottle to Adrian's office. He stood before the windows, the city glowing below. Grace placed it on his desk. This code belongs to cargo, not medicine. Adrian's expression sharpened. How do you know? She explained the warehouse and the altered pills. When she finished, she expected him to order her silent. Instead, he asked, What do you need to prove it? The question changed something between them. Access to the delivery records, Grace said, and someone I can trust. You have both. Adrian entered the code into a secure terminal. The screen flashed red. His face went still. That shipment belonged to a sealed Romano route, known only to Adrian, and 3 people closest to him. We tell no one, Adrian said quietly. The following evening, he arrived at Romano Crown Hotel through a private entrance with Marcus and Grace. The ballroom above glittered with another charity event, but beneath the polished floors stretched miles of storage corridors used for temporary freight transfers. Marcus unlocked a reinforced door. Rows of medical cartons stood beneath humming fluorescent lights. Grace walked slowly between them, comparing shipping labels with the code she had copied from Elena's prescription bottle. At first glance, everything appeared perfect. Then she noticed one serial number repeated on 3 different pallets. That can't happen, she whispered. Every shipment should be unique. Adrian stepped closer. Grace peeled back a replacement label, revealing an older code hidden underneath. Someone had deliberately changed the records. Marcus photographed every pallet, while Adrian copied the warehouse log onto an encrypted drive. Then every light went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Only the red emergency lamps flickered to life, bathing the concrete walls in a crimson glow. A distant metal door slammed. Footsteps echoed through the warehouse. Marcus drew his weapon and moved toward the sound. Grace felt someone rush past her. Before she could react, Adrian pulled her aside. A sharp blade sliced across his shoulder instead. The attacker disappeared into the maze of storage aisles before security reached them. Inside a small maintenance room, Grace locked the door behind them. Blood stained Adrian's white shirt, but he ignored the wound. "You first," he said. "I'm fine. You could have been killed. So could you." Using an emergency first aid kit, Grace cleaned and closed the cut with steady hands, despite the pounding footsteps outside. Adrian watched her work. "You should have run." She tied the final bandage and finally met his eyes. "I didn't," she answered softly, "because you came back for me first." Silence settled between them. Beyond the door, the footsteps faded. Then a familiar voice drifted through the empty corridor. Grace Miller. The attacker hadn't guessed her identity. He had known exactly who she was all along. The words echoed through Grace's mind long after she and Adrian left the hotel. Whoever had attacked them wasn't searching for random witnesses. Someone had been watching her for weeks. The following morning, Marcus increased security around the Romano estate, but Grace noticed something else. Her room had been disturbed. Nothing valuable was missing. Instead, drawers had been opened, books shifted, and even the lining beneath her suitcase had been examined. "They're searching," she whispered. She stopped using the room for anything important. That evening, Grace visited Lily Chen, the quiet receptionist who worked at Romano Crown. "If anything happens to me," Grace said, handing her a tiny sealed envelope, "don't open this unless Adrian asks for it himself." Lily nodded without questions. Back at the mansion, Grace sat before the mirror with a thin strip of flexible metal no wider than a ribbon. Hidden inside it rested an almost invisible memory card containing every copied shipping record and altered serial number. With patient fingers, she braided the strip deep inside her long hair. No ordinary search would ever find it. When Adrian discovered what she had done, frustration crossed his face. "I'm assigning 2 bodyguards." "No." It wasn't a request. "It feels like a prison." He looked at her for a long moment before slowly placing a small emergency alarm in her hand. "If you won't let them stay beside you, promise you'll press this the second you feel unsafe." Grace closed her fingers around the device. "I promise." Neither of them noticed Victoria standing halfway down the hallway. She heard only fragments. "Hidden. Safe. No one will find it." Later that night, Victoria entered Grace's room while everyone slept. The drawers revealed nothing. The closet revealed nothing. Only one object caught her attention. A fine silver-colored strand caught between the teeth of Grace's hairbrush. Victoria held it beneath the bedroom light. It wasn't hair. It was metal. A slow smile spread across her face. She finally knew exactly where Grace had hidden the evidence, and the charity gala was only 2 days away. The Romano Crown shimmered beneath thousands of crystal lights as Chicago's elite gathered for the annual Winter Charity Gala. Grace moved quietly through the ballroom, greeting guests and assisting the staff, her dark braid resting over one shoulder. She could feel Adrian watching from across the room, though neither of them spoke. Victoria waited until cameras, donors, and reporters surrounded the central staircase. Then she called Grace's name. "You've become very comfortable pretending you belong here." The room grew silent. Victoria stepped closer. "You earned sympathy. You earned my grandmother's trust. and now you're trying to steal my fiancé." Grace remained calm. "I never wanted what belongs to someone else." Victoria laughed. "No, you wanted something hidden." Before anyone understood her meaning, she seized Grace's braid and raised a polished silver pair of scissors, one sharp cut. The heavy braid slipped into Victoria's hand. Gasps echoed beneath the chandeliers. Grace closed her eyes for only a moment before gathering the fallen strands from the marble floor. She took the scissors back, trimmed the uneven ends herself, and looked directly at Victoria. "You didn't humiliate me." Her voice carried through the ballroom. "You destroyed evidence." For the first time, uncertainty crossed Victoria's face. She hurriedly tore apart the severed braid, searching for the hidden memory card. There was nothing inside. The elevator doors opened. Adrian Romano stepped into the frozen ballroom. His eyes fell upon Grace's shortened hair, then the scissors in Victoria's shaking hand. Without hesitation, he removed his tailored coat and wrapped it around Grace's shoulders. "No one touches a member of the Romano household," he said, "and keeps unrestricted access to my empire." He turned toward Marcus. "Revoke every security clearance assigned to Victoria Caldwell. Lock down this hotel. No files leave this building." Victoria stared at him in disbelief. "You can't choose a maid over our families." Adrian answered without raising his voice. "I'm choosing the truth." Grace lowered her eyes. She knew why he couldn't end the engagement that night. The Caldwell family's political protection still shielded hundreds of innocent Romano employees from federal prosecution. Power had defended her, but it was still standing between them. Far across the lobby, Lily quietly tightened her grip around a small, sealed envelope hidden inside her purse. The next morning, Adrian gathered the Romano Council inside the executive boardroom. Rain streaked the floor-to-ceiling windows as Gabriel Shaw connected a laptop to the large display. "I wish this were unnecessary," Gabriel said. Security footage filled the screen. Every eye followed the image of Grace entering the hotel's security office shortly after midnight. Moments later, another camera showed what appeared to be Grace handing a flash drive to a man wearing the badge of a rival shipping company. A heavy silence settled over the room. Grace stared at the screen in disbelief. "That's impossible," she said quietly. "I was in the medical room having my arm treated after the attack." Gabriel calmly placed printed records on the table. "The clinic log is empty. Hallway cameras confirm you never entered." Marcus frowned. Something felt wrong. Grace looked toward Adrian. "You know I wouldn't betray your family." He held her gaze but said nothing. The council erupted with demands for punishment. Several capos insisted she be detained until every answer was uncovered. Adrian slowly stood. "No one touches her." The room fell silent. "Marcus," he continued, "escort Miss Miller somewhere safe." Grace's heart sank. Not because he was protecting her, because he wasn't defending her innocence. An hour later, a black sedan stopped outside the small neighborhood bakery that had once belonged to Grace's mother. The faded sign still hung above the windows, untouched by time. Rain soaked the empty street. Grace stepped from the car without opening her umbrella. Adrian remained inside. She looked back only once. "You protected my life," she said through the rain, "but you still couldn't believe my word." Before Adrian found an answer, she quietly closed the door. The sedan disappeared into the gray afternoon. Back at the Romano estate, Elena suddenly collapsed beside the grand staircase. At nearly the same moment, Dr. Hannah Brooks failed to answer every call. By nightfall, she had vanished without a trace. Grace unlocked the door to her late mother's old bakery just before dawn. Dust floated through pale sunlight, settling over empty display cases that once held warm bread and birthday cakes. She found the cracked mirror behind the counter, trimmed the uneven edges of her short hair, and whispered, "It's only hair. I'll grow it again." For the first time in weeks, the room was quiet. No bodyguards, no marble halls, no whispered suspicions, only memories. Across the city, silence did not last inside Romano Holdings. Federal agents seized one of the family's cargo ships after illegal weapons were discovered aboard. Television screens filled with breaking news, while longtime business partners canceled meetings and investors fled. Every headline carried the Romano name. Victoria arrived beside her father, Senator Caldwell, offering a solution. "My family can slow the investigation," she said calmly. "But Gabriel must oversee operations until everything settles." Several board members reluctantly agreed. Adrian refused to answer. He no longer knew which allies remained loyal. As the emergency meeting stretched into the afternoon, Gabriel quietly poured Adrian a glass of mineral water before continuing his presentation. No one noticed anything unusual. Minutes later, Adrian stopped speaking. His breathing became shallow. The conference room blurred before his eyes. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered across the polished black floor. Marcus rushed forward. Lawyers shouted for an ambulance. Gabriel stepped back, wearing the perfect expression of concern. Adrian collapsed before anyone reached him. While paramedics fought to stabilize him, Marcus remembered Elena's mysterious illness and Grace's warning about altered medication. He immediately called the only person he still trusted. Grace answered on the second ring. "He suddenly can't breathe," Marcus said. "His pulse is dropping. He's confused." Grace closed her eyes. The symptoms aligned too perfectly. "It's the same poison," she whispered. "The one used on Elena. Don't let anyone move him until I get there." Marcus looked toward the waiting ambulance. Gabriel was already insisting Adrian be transferred to a different private hospital. For the first time, Marcus realized the greatest danger might already be standing inside the room. Ignoring Gabriel's protests, Marcus ordered the ambulance to divert to Romano's longtime private hospital. Grace was waiting outside before the doors even opened. One glance at Adrian's pale face was enough. "Draw blood before anyone gives him another medication," she said. Gabriel stepped forward. "You're a maid, not a physician." Grace never looked at him. "I'm the only person here who recognized the same symptoms twice." Hours later, a laboratory technician hurried into the intensive care unit carrying fresh results. The report confirmed traces of a rare toxin that should never have been inside a prescription. Before anyone could speak, Dr. Hannah Brooks quietly walked into the room. She looked exhausted. "I can't keep lying anymore." Tears filled her eyes as she admitted Gabriel had threatened her son unless she altered Elena's prescriptions and falsified medical records. The poison had been administered slowly for months, making the illness appear natural. Then came the truth that froze the room. "The bombing that killed Adrian's sister," Hannah whispered. "Gabriel planned it. He wanted control of the Romano shipping routes long before Adrian inherited them." Marcus clenched his fists. Gabriel had not betrayed the family. He had built his future upon their grief. Meanwhile, Victoria secretly entered Gabriel's office searching for financial files that could clear her own name. Instead, she discovered offshore accounts, false freight records, and payments connected to the poisoned shipments. She copied everything. But Gabriel was already watching. Within minutes, Victoria and Hannah disappeared together, forced into a refrigerated warehouse near Calumet Harbor. Grace studied the recovered shipping codes spread across Adrian's hospital table. "They're expecting us to chase the real cargo." She calmly slid one document aside. "So we'll give Gabriel something even more valuable." She created a false transport code that appeared to expose the location of every hidden Romano account. Marcus understood immediately. It was bait. Late that night, Adrian regained consciousness just long enough to squeeze Grace's hand. His voice was barely stronger than a whisper. "Come back safely." Then Gabriel's call reached Marcus. "I have Victoria, Hannah, and the only evidence that can save the Romano Empire." The trap had begun. Grace carried the false shipping file into the abandoned warehouse at Calumet Harbor while icy mist drifted between towering containers. Gabriel waited beneath harsh industrial lights, convinced she had brought every secret he wanted. Victoria and Hannah were tied nearby, frightened but unharmed. "You were always smarter than they realized," Gabriel said with a satisfied smile. "Hand me the file." Grace took another step. "You spent years hiding behind loyal faces," she replied. "Tonight everyone finally sees yours." Gabriel reached for the folder. At that instant, Grace quietly pressed the emergency alarm Adrian had once insisted she keep with her. Hidden inside the false file, it transmitted Marcus the warehouse location and activated the automatic freight tracking code she had prepared. Outside, police units and federal investigators surrounded the docks, while Marcus led Romano security through the maze of containers. Realizing he had been deceived, Gabriel tried to escape and raised his weapon toward Adrian, who had arrived despite still recovering. Before anyone else moved, Grace struck the nearby industrial fire control switch. Powerful sprinklers burst overhead, filling the warehouse with dense curtains of water and steam. Visibility vanished. In the confusion, Marcus and his team safely restrained Gabriel and his remaining men. When the mist settled, Grace played the recovered audio recording. Gabriel's own voice admitted to poisoning Elena, arranging illegal shipments, and planning the bombing that had killed Adrian's sister years before. Silence filled the warehouse. Victoria lowered her head, knowing she would answer for destroying evidence and helping Gabriel's scheme continue. Months later, Gabriel stood trial. The stolen financial records, Lily's preserved envelope, and Grace's evidence ended his control forever. After recovering, Adrian gathered every Romano employee inside the hotel ballroom where everything had changed. Standing before them, he apologized to Grace without excuses. Then he asked her to build an independent medical and employee wellness program for every worker in the Romano organization. Grace accepted only after he promised that respect would never again depend on power. The following spring, sunlight filled the free neighborhood health center she opened in her mother's memory. Her hair had begun to grow again, and she donated its first long braid to children receiving cancer treatment. Outside, Adrian waited quietly instead of walking in. "May I be part of your life?" he asked. This time, Grace reached for his hand first. Together, they proved that the strongest empire is not built through fear, but through trust, dignity, and the courage to choose each other. When Adrian chose to stand outside Grace's neighborhood health center and ask for a place in her life instead of demanding one, everything they had survived finally found its meaning. In the end, it wasn't power that changed their future. It was two people choosing each other with honesty and respect. This story reminds us that real trust is never created by promises alone. It grows through the quiet moments when someone keeps showing up, even after fear, betrayal, and heartbreak. Today, Think about one person who has earned your trust through their actions the way Grace did. If they've quietly stood by you, don't let another day pass without telling them how much that truly means. Have you ever trusted someone because of what they did, not what they said? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if Grace and Adrian's journey stayed with you, be sure to join us for the next story. You never know whose quiet courage will change everything next time.